Maria's hands trembled as she packed up the remnants of her kitchen, the sharp sting of betrayal still raw in her chest. Just days ago, the place she poured her soul into, the bustling restaurant where her abuela's recipes had come alive, had fired her without warning, accusing her of being too traditional, not fitting the brand. They wanted her to erase the flavors of her heritage. The stories simmered into every pot, every tortilla folded by hand. But Maria wasn't done. Beneath the neon city lights, in the shadows of forgotten alleys, she ignited a quiet rebellion, an underground pop-up serving the food her ancestors fought to preserve. What started as a small gathering of hungry hearts grew into a cultural revolution, challenging not just the restaurant's greed, but the erasure of identity itself. This is the story of a Latina chef who refused to be silenced, who turned injustice into a movement, and who reminded a city that true flavor lives in the courage to be yourself. Maria had always known her kitchen was more than just a workplace. It was a sanctuary, a sacred space where the flavors of her childhood came alive. The aromas of smoky chipotle, fresh cilantro, and slow-cooked carne asada weren't just ingredients. They were memories, the legacy of her abuela's hands stirring pots and sharing stories. For years, Maria had worked in that high-end downtown restaurant, one that prided itself on modern twists and sleek presentations. But to Maria, the soul of the food lay in its tradition, in the imperfect, handcrafted warmth that couldn't be bottled or stylized to suit a trend. She cooked with heart, infusing every dish with history, resilience, and love. Yet, the management saw her passion as a liability. "We need something fresher, more mainstream," they told her coldly during a meeting she still replayed in her mind. "Your food is too ethnic, too old-fashioned. We want to attract a new crowd, not scare them away." The words hit like a knife. It wasn't just a job. It was her identity they were erasing. Her heart ached as she cleared out her locker, the familiar kitchen suddenly alien and unwelcoming. Walking out that door, she felt the weight of countless stories untold, of flavors muted by fear and commerce. But Maria was not one to bow down. In the days that followed, with bruised pride and a fire burning quietly inside her, she found a small, forgotten space beneath the city's hum, a cramped basement in an old building, dimly lit and smelling of dust and forgotten dreams. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She pulled out her mother's old pots, rolled fresh masa by hand, and began to cook. Words spread slowly, whispers carried by friends and strangers hungry for something real. Tables filled with those craving not just food, but connection, to their roots, to their culture, and to a story bigger than any restaurant's menu. Maria's underground pop-up was born, a secret feast of authenticity. Each night, the basement transformed into a haven where laughter echoed, salsa music breathed life into the walls, and plates arrived piled high with the colors of her homeland. The crowd was diverse, immigrants longing for a taste of home, curious food lovers eager to break from the sterile norms, and even former skeptics brought in by the undeniable magic simmering in Maria's dishes. Slowly, her defiant little venture began to ripple beyond that basement. It challenged the city's complacency and the restaurant's sanitized vision. Maria wasn't just cooking meals. She was serving rebellion, culture, and love on every plate. And as the underground pop-up grew, so did a movement, one that celebrated heritage, demanded respect, and proved that sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with a single, soulful meal. In the weeks that followed, Maria's underground pop-up became more than just a hidden spot for late-night diners. It blossomed into a sanctuary for those seeking something deeper than just food. Each night, as she lit the worn stove in the cramped basement, Maria could feel the weight of generations pressing gently on her shoulders. The chipped walls seemed to hum with stories of immigrants who'd crossed oceans with nothing but hope, of abuelas who'd stirred pots under flickering candles, and of communities who found strength in shared meals. Her customers weren't just eating, they were reconnecting, reclaiming parts of themselves long suppressed. Among them were young professionals dressed in tailored suits, curious about the roots beneath their city's gleaming skyscrapers, elderly immigrants who wiped tears from their eyes at the familiar taste of mole and tamales, artists and musicians who found inspiration in the vibrant, unfiltered culture Maria served with every dish. Word spread quietly but fervently. Social media posts were tagged, discreet messages passed along in whispered conversations. Soon, lines stretched down the alleyway, the once-forgotten basement now pulsing with energy and life. But with growing success came challenges. The restaurant that had fired Maria caught wind of her pop-up and saw it as a threat, a challenge to their sanitized brand and narrow vision of acceptable cuisine. They sent letters warning her to stop, threatening legal action, insisting she had no right to use recipes inspired by their property. But Maria knew better. Her recipes were hers by blood and memory. The culture that flavored her dishes belonged to her community, to the streets and kitchens of her ancestors, not to corporate lawyers. She refused to back down. Instead, she organized community dinners, inviting local leaders, artists, and activists to stand with her. The media caught wind of the story, a Latina chef fighting back against erasure, reclaiming her voice and heritage. Stories of Maria's pop-up appeared in newspapers and online forums, sparking conversations about identity, belonging, and the power of food as resistance. In this crucible of struggle, Maria found herself transforming, not just as a chef, but as a leader, a symbol of cultural pride and resilience. Every meal she served was a declaration. That tradition was not a relic to be hidden away, but a vibrant thread weaving together past and future. And as the city slowly awakened to the richness of its diverse roots, Maria's small kitchen beneath the city streets became a beacon, a reminder that the most profound revolutions are nourished by the simple act of sharing a meal made with love. As Maria's underground pop-up flourished, so too did her sense of purpose and the responsibility that came with it. The once dim basement became a vibrant hub not only for food but for stories, music, and connection. People brought their laughter and tears, their memories and hopes, all gathered around tables laden with rich, fragrant dishes. Maria listened as elders recounted tales of their homelands, artists shared dreams of expression, and young people wrestled with their identities between two cultures. Each story reminded her why she fought so fiercely to keep her food and culture alive. The city began to change around her. Local markets stocked fresh ingredients that had once been rare or dismissed. Small businesses sprung up, inspired by her courage and authenticity. Food critics, who had once turned their noses up at traditional dishes, now wrote glowing reviews praising Maria's devotion to heritage. Invitations came for collaborations and festivals, but Maria remained rooted in the basement kitchen where it all began. She knew her true power lay in the intimacy of those humble walls and the community they nurtured. Yet, not everyone was pleased. The upscale restaurant chain that had fired her launched a public relations campaign, casting doubt on Maria's legitimacy and painting her as a nostalgic relic clinging to an outdated past. They tried to drown her voice with their polished ads and slick branding. But the people, her people, stood firm. They shared their experiences, their gratitude for a space where culture was honored, not erased. Support poured in from unexpected places. Renowned chefs offering mentorship, activists lending their platforms, neighbors volunteering their time and resources. Through it all, Maria felt the steady pulse of change, not just in the city's streets, but in her own heart. She realized that this journey was bigger than herself. It was about reclaiming history, about justice, about the freedom to be seen and heard as one's true self. As she prepared another night's meal, the rich smell of spices filling the air, Maria smiled quietly to herself. Fired for being herself, she had ignited a movement that no corporation could silence. This was only the beginning. With each passing day, Maria's underground pop-up became a beacon of hope and defiance. It was no longer just a place to eat. It was a gathering ground for voices that had been pushed to the margins, voices yearning to reclaim their culture and dignity. The walls of the basement reverberated with the rhythm of change. Laughter, clinking glasses, passionate conversations about heritage, identity, and belonging. Maria's food was the spark, but the flame was fueled by community. Yet, the battle was far from over. The restaurant that had once cast her out intensified their efforts to crush her uprising. Lawyers sent cease and desist letters, health inspectors appeared unannounced, and rumors spread to dissuade customers. Each obstacle threatened to extinguish the fire Maria had kindled. But with every challenge, the community rallied stronger. Friends, neighbors, and strangers volunteered to clean the basement, spread the word, and stand as witnesses against injustice. Local musicians performed for free. Artists donated murals celebrating cultural pride. Maria realized that her fight was no longer hers alone. It was a collective struggle against erasure and homogenization. The media caught wind of the unfolding story, framing it as a cultural revolution sparked by one woman's courage. Interviews, feature articles, and viral videos began circulating, capturing the raw emotion and unyielding spirit of Maria and her supporters. People across the city, many who had never tasted traditional food before, lined up to experience the genuine flavors of history and resilience. Through it all, Maria found herself transformed. The quiet, self-doubting chef had blossomed into a powerful leader, a voice for the silenced, a symbol of resistance. In the kitchen, she still folded tortillas with the same care her abuela taught her, but now each dish was also a message that heritage could not be bought, sold, or silenced. It was alive, breathing in every bite. And as the city embraced this awakening, Maria knew that the revolution she had sparked was not just about food, it was about reclaiming identity, demanding respect, and honoring the stories simmered into every pot. Fired for holding on to her roots, Maria had fed a movement hungry for justice. The momentum of Maria's movement soon reached the ears of city officials and cultural organizations who had long overlooked the rich diversity within their own communities. Invitations arrived, official forums, cultural festivals, and city council meetings, offering Maria a platform to speak not only about food, but about the broader fight for cultural preservation and equity. Though nervous at first, Maria stepped into these new arenas with the same passion that had fueled her underground pop-up. She spoke candidly about the pain of being dismissed, the injustice of erasure, and the power of reclaiming heritage through something as simple, yet profound, as a meal shared among friends. Her words resonated deeply, igniting a wave of support from people across different backgrounds and walks of life. Meanwhile, The upscale restaurant that had fired her faced growing public backlash. Loyal patrons began boycotting, employees questioned their own values, and shareholders demanded accountability for the company's tone-deaf approach to culture. Maria's story had pierced through the sanitized facades of corporate branding, exposing a hunger not just for authentic food, but for authenticity in leadership and respect. Behind the scenes, Maria continued to nurture her pop-up with the same hands that had once trembled in heartbreak. Every plate was a reminder of the journey she had traveled, the pain, the struggle, and the triumph. Her community had grown from a small gathering to a powerful network of advocates, artists, and everyday people united by a shared love for culture and justice. But Maria never forgot the personal cost, the nights she cried in the dark, the moments of doubt that threatened to consume her. It was in those shadows that her resilience had taken root, transforming fear into fuel. And as she looked out over the crowd one evening, faces glowing in the warm candlelight, Maria understood something profound. Her fight was far from over, but she was no longer alone. The revolution she had sparked was a living thing, breathing hope and courage into every heart it touched. Fired for honoring her roots, Maria had become a catalyst for change, proving that sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with a single, soulful meal. With the winds of change sweeping through the city, Maria felt a new kind of strength settle in her bones. No longer just a chef fighting for her recipes, she had become a voice for a broader movement, a movement that challenged the erasure of culture, the silencing of stories, and the commercialization of identity. Her underground pop-up had transformed from a humble basement kitchen into a symbol of resilience and pride. Each night, as the aroma of slow-cooked chilies and fresh tortillas filled the air, she saw faces light up, not just with hunger satisfied, but with a rekindled connection to heritage. The community that had gathered around her table became a family bound by more than food. They were bound by the shared struggle of being seen and respected. Maria's courage inspired others to reclaim their own traditions, to stand tall in the face of pressure to conform or erase. Street vendors began showcasing dishes that celebrated their histories. Artists painted murals honoring their roots. Musicians played songs that echoed the heartbeat of generations. Yet, Maria remained humble, often retreating to the quiet moments in the kitchen where it all began. She knew this was a beginning, not an end, a chapter in a story still unfolding. The journey had cost her dearly. Friendships strained, nights spent wrestling with doubt, the sting of being dismissed. But those wounds had healed into scars that told tales of perseverance. And in those scars lay a fierce pride. The city had tasted the power of authenticity, and it hungered for more. Maria's underground pop-up wasn't just serving food, it was serving truth, justice, and the unbreakable spirit of a culture that refused to be forgotten. Fired for cooking what she loved, Maria had rekindled a flame that would burn long after the last plate was served. As Maria's story spread beyond the city limits, it began to touch hearts in places she had never imagined. Invitations arrived from neighboring towns, cultural centers, and even international food festivals eager to celebrate her fearless dedication to tradition and identity. Yet, Maria was careful. She knew the magic lived in the intimate moments, the whispered stories around her basement's worn wooden tables, the shared smiles over plates heavy with history and hope. Despite the growing spotlight, she refused to lose sight of why she started, to nourish not just bodies, but souls hungry for connection and recognition. Alongside her culinary revolution, Maria mentored young chefs who, like her, struggled to hold onto their heritage in an industry that prized trends over truth. She taught them that food was a language, a vessel of memory and love, that could spark change if wielded with courage. The pop-up grew into a community kitchen, offering cooking classes, cultural events, and a safe haven for those silenced by prejudice and profit-driven agendas. But the fight was ongoing. The corporate giants, who once dismissed her, continued to lurk in the shadows, attempting to replicate her success without honoring the culture that birthed it. Maria responded not with anger, but with unwavering grace and the relentless strength of authenticity. She built alliances with fellow activists, chefs, and artists to create platforms where marginalized voices could be heard and celebrated. The city itself began to transform. Murals blossomed on once-forgotten walls, street festivals honored diverse histories, and conversations about cultural respect moved from whispered fears to proud declarations. Through it all, Maria remained the heart of the movement, her kitchen a beacon shining in the dark. She had been fired for cooking traditional food, but in reclaiming her roots, she had ignited a cultural revolution, one plate at a time, one story at a time, one soul at a time. In the quiet moments between serving meals and speaking at events, Maria often reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the heartbreak, the doubt, and the unyielding hope that had carried her forward. She remembered the sting of being told her food was too traditional, the coldness of the boardroom that dismissed her heritage as a liability. But those memories no longer weighed her down. They fueled the fire in her heart. She saw clearly now that her fight was never just about food. It was about identity, dignity, and the power to define oneself on one's own terms. Her underground pop-up was more than a business. It was a sanctuary, a classroom, a battleground, and a celebration all at once. Maria had become a storyteller through her dishes, a keeper of legacies, and a bridge between past and future. Families came together around her tables, reconnecting with traditions they feared losing. Young people found pride in their roots, inspired to carry the torch forward. Maria's story became a testament to the strength found in embracing who you are, even when the world tries to make you forget. And in that embrace, she found healing, not just for herself, but for a community that had long been silenced. Fired for her heritage, Maria turned rejection into revolution, reminding us all that the most powerful flavor is the one seasoned with courage, love, and unwavering authenticity. The city's streets had begun to pulse with a new energy, one born from the collective heartbeat of people refusing to be silenced. Maria's underground pop-up had sparked more than just a culinary revival. It had ignited conversations about heritage, respect, and belonging that echoed in community centers, schools, and homes across neighborhoods. Maria herself had become a symbol, a living testament to what it meant to hold fast to your roots in a world eager to commodify and control. But with visibility came scrutiny. There were moments when the glare of the spotlight felt overwhelming, when whispers of doubt crept in, questioning if she could sustain this movement, if the weight of expectation might break her spirit. Yet, in those moments, Maria returned to the kitchen, where the familiar rhythm of chopping, stirring, and tasting grounded her. Here, surrounded by the scents and textures of her ancestors' land, she remembered why she started: to feed more than hunger, to nurture identity and pride. Her team had grown too, a tapestry of voices and talents united by a shared mission. Young chefs who once hid their heritage now wore it proudly, crafting dishes that honored tradition while embracing innovation. Artists painted vibrant murals celebrating cultural diversity. Musicians filled the air with songs that told stories older than the city itself. Maria's pop-up had become a movement not just for food, but for justice. It was a place where people came not only to eat but to be seen, heard, and valued. The fight against erasure had turned into a celebration of resilience, creativity, and hope. And as Maria looked out over the crowd one evening, faces alight with joy and belonging, she felt a profound peace. Fired for cooking the food of her heritage, she had created something infinitely more powerful, a cultural revolution that would ripple through generations to come. Amidst the celebration, Maria remained acutely aware that her journey was but a single chapter in a larger story still unfolding. The challenges of preserving culture in the face of commercialization and prejudice were far from over. Yet, she took solace in the strength of community, the way people came together, united not by fear, but by love and respect for one another's stories. Maria began collaborating with schools and community groups, sharing her knowledge and passion with young people hungry to understand their roots. She saw in their eyes the same hunger she had felt, the desire to connect, to belong, to be proud. These moments, teaching and mentoring, became some of the most fulfilling of her life. She knew that change was not a single act but a continuous, collective effort. The pop-up evolved into a cultural hub, a place where history was preserved not only on plates but through stories, art, music, and shared experiences. Maria's own story inspired others to reclaim their voices, to resist the pressure to conform or hide their identities. She received letters and messages from across the country, stories of people igniting similar movements in their own communities. Though the path was difficult and the struggle ongoing, Maria felt an unshakable hope. Fired for her traditions, she had built a legacy of resilience. Her journey was proof that the courage to be authentic could spark revolutions far beyond the kitchen. As the years passed, Maria's underground pop-up became a beloved institution in the city's cultural landscape, a place where generations gathered to honor the past and dream boldly about the future. The small basement kitchen had expanded into a welcoming space filled with laughter, music, and the tantalizing aromas of recipes passed down through generations. Maria watched as families brought their children, eager to teach them the flavors of their heritage, and as new immigrants found a place to feel at home. She never forgot the pain of rejection or the loneliness of those early days, but she carried those memories as a source of strength, a reminder of why her fight mattered. Though the upscale restaurant that had fired her still operated, its influence waned as the city's appetite for authentic culture grew stronger. Maria's movement had shifted the narrative, proving that heritage was not a barrier to success, but its foundation. She was invited to speak at conferences and participate in panels advocating for cultural preservation and equity in the culinary world. Through it all, Maria remained grounded in the simple truth that had carried her from heartbreak to triumph. Food is a language of love and identity, and to deny that is to deny a piece of the soul. Her story became a beacon for anyone who had ever felt marginalized or silenced, a testament that authenticity, courage, and community could rewrite the rules. Fired for honoring tradition, Maria had fed a city's soul and, in doing so, nourished a revolution of identity, pride, and justice. The night air was warm as Maria stood outside her pop-up, watching the last of the guests drift home, their faces flushed with contentment and connection. She inhaled deeply, savoring the mingling scents of roasting chilies and fresh cilantro that lingered like a promise. Around her, the city hummed with life, unaware that beneath its streets, a quiet revolution had taken root, one born from a woman's refusal to be erased. Maria smiled, her heart full. Fired for cooking the food of her ancestors, she had done more than reclaim her place in the kitchen. She had sparked a movement that celebrated the richness of culture, the strength of community, and the power of identity. As she turned to close the door, she knew the journey was far from over. But in this moment, with the memories of struggle behind her and the promise of change ahead, Maria felt a fierce hope burning bright, a hope seasoned with tradition, resilience, and love that would feed generations to come.